Okay, so I'm going to be recording this. And if you don't want your face to show up, please turn off your video. So thank you all very much for joining. This is, I believe, the fourth webinar that we've conducted on how to prepare a successful fellowship proposal. And I hope you will find this very useful. I would like to introduce to you our guests who will be making presentations. First, I would like to present Anandi Knuppel, who is the AIIS special, special initiatives and communications specialist, or strategic initiatives and communications specialist. And Anandi is going to helps us with a lot of things, including our podcasts and our social media, and has sent out she took care of all the registrations for you for registering for this webinar. Arvind Alangovan is a historian, and he's a professor at Wright State University, and he is going to he has actually served on the AIIS selection committee for 3 years, and he is going to be presenting about how to prepare a successful proposal. I will also be speaking, and then Anurag Advani is going to be talking about his experience with first submitting an application that was not selected, and then he actually used the selection committee's comments that he received on his first year application to submit a really outstanding application the next year. And he got an incredibly high score the next year, thanks to all his diligence in taking the reviewers' comments seriously. And he was awarded an AIIS fellowship, and he actually has recently received his PhD. So he's going to talk to you about his experience. So let me first of all share my screen. So can everybody see this screen? Anandi, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
My to-do list, you still...
Yeah. So, okay. So Anandi is going to actually be making the first presentation.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. I hope that it's a helpful session. If you have just a couple notes as we get started, if you could go ahead and mute if you're not already muted. I have all kinds of people in my house doing all kinds of things, running around screaming at any given time, so it's always a good idea to keep muted. The second thing is, if you will have questions at the end, if something comes up and you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll be sure to go through all of those, as many as we can get through at the end. To get started, there is a wonderful application packet that you're probably familiar with that is on the website. Of all of the pieces of the fellowship application, perhaps the most important and substantial piece is the project statement. And I think given for any application, that's the case, and especially for the AIIS fellowship application. So of here in the evaluation criteria, you'll see that the selection committee assesses each application on the following. Seems like, and don't be offended if I mute you if you're coming up with some sound. So, okay, thank you. Okay. Elise, if you can go to the next slide, please, for the evaluation criteria. I think slide number 2. Thank you. So we have the excellence and the merit of the project, project design and methodology, and then the candidate's academic and or professional record. Oh, sorry, Elise. Looks like we lost the slide. Thank you. So the first two here, the excellence and the merit of the project and the project design and methodology, are probably the most the two most important things for your project statement. The academic and professional record, number 3 here, you're going to have other opportunities and other parts of the packet to reflect your record, academically, professionally, artistically, whatever it is for whatever fellowship you're applying for. You'll have like your CV, you'll have a personal statement, and you'll have just other areas where you can reference that. So in the project statement, it's better to spend the time and the real estate with your project statement focusing on the excellence and merit of the project and the design and methodology. So for the project statement, the things that are being considered by the committee are things like originality, innovation in the project idea. Does the applicant have knowledge of the relevant scholarship in the area, and in India, in South Asia more broadly, and do they have the knowledge of the broader academic field or broader professional field, artistic field, whatever it is for the application. And 2, for project design and methodology. So this is really spelling out, do you have a sense of what you're going to do when you get into the field? Where and when is the research going to be conducted? And here it's important to note that the boon of these fellowships is that it allows you to conduct your research in India. Thus, the research needs to be conducted in India. I think that I had colleagues when I was going through my PhD program that could largely work in different archives around the world, not necessarily in India. And so this fellowship wasn't necessarily a good match for them. If your work necessitates it being in India, in an archive specifically in India even, or in field sites in India, that needs to be spelled out clearly so that the committee understands where your project needs to be conducted. Things like the time span, knowing the time span of the fellowship, how are you going to split up your time? What is going to take up your time? And what's your general research plan? What sites are you going to visit? Is it going to be one site, multiple sites? How will you split that up? What does it look like for you and why those sites? What plans do you already have in place for your project? Have you contacted anybody? Who are your contacts? Have you contacted institutions, universities, individual members of a community? Who are you going to work with? And what are you going to do when you get in to the field? Basically, this is so that the committee understands that you know what you're doing and you can hit the ground running, as opposed to spending a good portion of your fellowship time and money setting all of this up. So projects that have a better design and methodology all spelled out ahead of time, that you've put in the thought to this ahead of time, will score like more highly. And yeah, so then coming to number 3 on the academic and professional record, that's to say, so you can make nods to your academic and professional record, things that will indicate kind of like signposting in your project statement about your background and record and things that make you, an expert and knowledgeable in your field for this particular project. But don't spend too much time on it. This is a limited space and it's more about the project than yourself, because there are other places in the application to spend time talking about yourself and your background. And that will be your CV and your personal statement. The personal statement, is to note, is a newer addition in the last few years. It is in lieu of letters of recommendation, which we no longer require. And of course, Elise, please feel free to jump in if I miss anything at all. But we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So a little bit about the process here. Your application is going to be read by a committee composed of scholars in a variety of disciplines. So the selection committee has 10 members. Each proposal is read by 3 members of the selection committee. Notes from kind of last year, I believe we have a split about half social sciences and humanities scholars on the committee. There's a range of disciplines. We have several historians in different disciplines as well. Political science, anthropology, history of religion, and just kind of religious studies, geography, gender studies, film and media, art history, and literary and cultural history. Forgive me if I've missed any there, Elise, but that seems to cover everybody. A range of disciplines. Now, most of the scholars, thanks, Elise, we're kind of mid-career or senior scholars. They've published extensively in India and on South Asia. And so these are going to be experts in the study of India and South Asia more broadly. They're also scholars that generally have a wide-ranging interest. So they're not going to be focused specifically in their area, but they're interested in general in India studies and South Asia studies. All that being said, so when your proposals come in, they'll get assigned, hopefully, probably to, someone who is in your discipline, at least one person within that kind of 3-member subcommittee for your application. But not everybody who will be reading your project statement and your materials is going to be an expert in your specific subdiscipline. And that's extremely important to remember when you're writing your project statement and editing it. Is that you're going to have an educated audience in South Asia studies and India studies, but these are not all going to be specialists in your subfield. So it's really important to not rely on jargon, on discipline-specific acronyms, on definitions that specialists would know. If you have to use any of these terms or acronyms within your project statement, be sure to spell them out and define them on first use. And then if you need to use them throughout, you can, of course, but don't rely on the jargon itself as signposting. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know the literature to take your project statement to be a successful one. It's about in the explanation and storytelling around the project to explain to specialists and non-specialists. So like a more generally educated audience. And the specialists don't know what you're doing, so no worries there, but you want to make sure you're including the rest of the possible readership for these in the project statement. Yeah, so then kind of the second point here, equally important, is language proficiency. So AIIS, of course, has our wonderful language programs, which are amazing. If you haven't been on them or are familiar with them, that's kind of a secondary huge area for AIIS. So it takes language proficiency and preparation very seriously for fellowship applications. It's really important that you also spell out exactly what what language proficiency your project requires and how you're going to be prepared to meet those requirements for your project. A special note for if you have native language proficiency, for example, if Hindi is your mother tongue, it's really important that you're still explicit about your language readiness and what language requirements your project, what language proficiency your project requires. So even if it's your first language, you need to spell out that you have this level of language proficiency, but here's also what your project requires. So for example, if you have Hindi as your mother tongue, but you're going to be working in a rural area, Hindi will help you somewhat, but perhaps that rural area may not speak the exact form of Hindi that you grew up with. So there might be some additional training, some additional tutorials that you will be doing to prepare for that, for example. Or you could be working, if Hindi is your mother tongue, but you're working in an archive that's, a different form of Hindi that's older from a specific area that you already have training to read that form of Hindi. Just some examples. It's just important to be explicit that you show you've thought about this and where language fits into your application. Yeah, okay, I think that's it. At least let me know if I missed anything. But if not, I will hand it over.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Anandi. So now we are going to move to Arvind. Arvind, can you can you, you're unmuted.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
good.
in.
So I will advance the slide. Okay. So Arvind is, again, Arvind has served on our selection committee for 3 years, and has seen, let me see, Arvind, you've probably seen well over 500 applications, probably more like 600, 600 applications
At
by
this
now.
point.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elise, and thanks everyone for joining us. And I'm going to be basically building on what Anandi has already excellently laid out, in terms of what you should be looking for as you're preparing your proposal, right? So I'll focus a little bit specifically on the project statement itself. And, these are things that as graduate students, we already know this, right? So you need to have all these elements that's listed on this PowerPoint slide. One thing that I would add, I mean, something that always struck us, I mean, I was on the selection committee for 3 years, is the proposals that typically get high scores in the initial rounds and even during discussions, etc., are the ones that are really very, very clear, right? So clarity of your thought, a clarity of your ideas, clarity of your methodology, and clarity about what you're actually going to be doing in India is absolutely essential. And I can also tell you, the reason is, I mean, yes, the selection committee is reading a lot of proposals. And remember that they are reading over a period of several weeks. And you can be rest assured that each of these proposals are being read by at least 3 people, right? And they are being read in detail. So no committee member actually skips any part of anyone's application. And they all pay a lot of attention to the project statement. So right from the very beginning, I think where you include a short abstract of what you're going to be doing, and then the 6-page proposal that comes after that, committee members pay a lot of attention to every aspect of what you have written, right? So to that extent, so it starts from the questions that you're asking, right? It starts from the archive and then the way you explain the archives you're going to be looking at. Why is this important? Has this question been answered by others? I mean, in all likelihood, it would be. But then if that is the case, then how are you distinguishing yourself from that literature, right? And then what are you going to be doing once you're going to India? So at least I think at this point, we can go to the next slide. Right. So basically, so continuing from there, explaining very clearly and perhaps even anticipating some of the questions that the committee member might have as they are reading your proposal would be very good. So for instance, you're going to say that I'm going to be working at the National Archives in Delhi for 3 months, and I'm going to be looking at XYZ papers, right? Now, in the proposal, you need to convince the reader that one, that the National Archives has the documents that you're saying you're going to be looking at. 2, that it is accessible. 3, what you're saying that you'll do it in 3 months would be feasible in those 3 months, right? So often one would be surprised. I mean, we received many good proposals, and of course, not everybody can be successful, at least in the first round. But one thing becomes very clear in many of the proposals: excellent ideas, but there is no sense of whether it is feasible. Like, how is this actually going to be done? Does the applicant know that these papers are available? Does the applicant know whether they are accessible? As we know in India, given the archival situation, sometimes it may be on the catalog, but it may not be in the archive, right? So giving the reader a very good sense of what's in the archive and how you're going to access it is, I would say, a prerequisite for a successful proposal. So just by saying that I'm going to go spend 3 months in this archive and look at these 3 documents or collections, you could say, that's not going to cut it, right? So you need far more details than just that when you're writing what you're going to be doing. And as far as the broader project description is concerned, yes, I did find, and we found while on the committee, that there were several projects, but many of them did not make the cut, not because they were not good, but because they were not interesting enough. Now, of course, the question always is, what is interesting? I mean, what's interesting to me may not be what's interesting to somebody else. But in general, we found that the successful proposals are the ones that does actually break the mold in some ways. It does ask interesting questions. It does make even the committee members think about a particular topic in a way that they may have not thought of before. So so those are the ways in which you can distinguish yourself, by thinking about how best you can write a project statement that would certainly excite and that would certainly interest a wide variety of committee members, right? As Sanandi said, there are faculty who are from various disciplines and sub-disciplines on the committee. So something that will, that would strike somebody as very interesting would be very helpful. So towards that end, I would say that one way, and Elise would talk about this too, is it's absolutely important to write several drafts of the research proposal, right? So don't just write 1 or maximum 2 before submitting the application. I think the earlier that you write your first draft, and then circulating it among your friends, circulating among your advisors and committee members, anybody else who is preferably somebody who's outside the field, that would be really helpful, because that is something that we saw in the application, that it became clear that, again, the very top and the very successful ones, it was very clear that a lot of thought has gone into it. So in other words, the more thought you put into it, it will show in the proposal. And it will also show in the way the committee members read it. Inevitably, you can be assured that it would be ranked high, because it is very clear that the proposal has gone through a lot of revisions, has gone through a lot of thought, has gone through a lot of engagement, perhaps with other people. So the more you can do that before you submit your application, the better it is, right? Elise, are you going to be doing, so next slide, are you doing it, or is that part of the project statement? I'm not sure.
I'll be just going over the next 3 slides, which is more like a
So yeah, I'll stop
summary.
there and happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll actually have plenty of time for questions at the end. And after I stop showing the slides, I will also be monitoring the chat. So if you don't want to ask your question out loud, you can certainly ask in the chat. So I'm going to actually just be going over some tips, some general tips that everyone should keep in mind. It's just really important. First of all, again, just reinforcing what Arvind said. It's essential that the committee knows what you are going to be doing in India. It can't be like a fishing expedition. You can't be like, I'm going to go to India and see what happens. I mean, not to be facetious, but a lot of people's proposals fail because they do not clearly explain what exactly they're going to be doing when they go to India. You have to say where you are going, what you are going to look at. If you're going to go to an archive, you have to say, you can't just say, I'm going to an archive to look at documents. You have to say what documents, okay? Exactly what documents, letters from, 1850 to 1860, written by this group of people. Whatever you're looking at, you have to be very, very specific. You're going to be talking to people. If you're going to be interviewing research subjects, you have to say, who are these people? Are you going to talk to 100 people? Are you going to talk to 50 people? What is the profile of these people? Are you deciding to choose these people because of their gender, because of their socioeconomic status, because of their religion? Whatever it is, you need to be specific. How are you going to select these people? What is your criteria for selecting these people? Again, be as specific as possible, because this is essential. This is what the committee needs to know in order to assess your project. You need to lay out and justify your methodology. So you're going to be talking to 50 fishermen. Why are you going to be talking to 50 fishermen and not 50 agricultural workers? You need to explain why this makes sense in terms of what your research questions are. So your methodology needs to match, your methodology absolutely needs to match, your methodology needs to match your research questions. Let's see. Can you still see, you can still see the slide, right? And Andy?
It looks grayed out to me, at least.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, hold on just one second. Okay, fantastic. Again, so the methodology absolutely needs to match your research questions. You also need to demonstrate that your methodology is feasible and that you can accomplish your goals in the period of time you are requesting. And this is another reason why proposals have failed in the past, because someone will say, I want to go to 4 or 5 different cities and interview 100 people in each city or whatever, and then they'll say, I'm going to do all this in 6 weeks. Well, that's just not feasible. That's just, the committee is going to think you're not being realistic, that you haven't thought this through very carefully. So again, you need to make sure that your timetable makes sense in terms of what you want to do. If you want to go to search, a lot of different archives, you're going to need to spend, quite a lot of time. You have to also remember that, sometimes things don't work exactly according to plan. You have to have a little extra time built in to be able to deal with obstacles that may come up. Sometimes people will have agreed to meet with you or to work with you, and then they, that you go to India and you find out that they're on vacation and they're not going to come back for another 3 weeks. So, you really have to build in some extra time to make sure that you have enough time to accomplish your goals. Okay, so a few other things. Bibliography. Bibliography is really, really important. We found a lot of people, unfortunately, do not pay enough attention to their bibliography. The selection committee will actually be scrutinizing your bibliography very carefully to make sure that you have included all the relevant sources, all the relevant scholarly research on your topic. And believe me, as Anandi said, one of the primary reader of your application is going to be a specialist in your field, and that person will know if there's a significant gap in your bibliography. So the bibliography should not be an afterthought. It's really an essential component of your project. So please do devote time to your bibliography. Identify the challenges you might face doing your research. You can't, some people I think have thought to themselves, well, if I don't mention this hurdle or this potential obstacle, maybe the committee won't notice or something. No, that's not the right strategy. Believe me, the committee will notice. The committee will ask, how does this person think they will be able to accomplish this given whatever obstacle? Whatever challenge you think you might have, you need to address it. The committee is not going to shoot down your project because it's difficult to accomplish or because it's challenging. No, the committee would shoot down your project if you have not acknowledged that there's a challenge. So if, for instance, you want to work in an area where most of the residents speak a very uncommonly taught language, and you actually have not had that language training, that's not going to be that's not automatically going to disqualify your application, but you must talk about how you are going to deal with that. You must talk about whether you're going to be hiring a local translator to work with you, and so forth. So these are the things you have to think about. You must acknowledge challenges and how you're going to address them. Your proposal, again, as Arvind said, one of the big problems that we've had with proposals is that people have written their proposal like either a dissertation proposal or a book proposal. They talk about, you know, in chapter 1, I'm going to do this, and in chapter 2, I'm going to do that, and in chapter 3, I'm going to do that. But they don't spend any time talking about what they're actually going to do when they go to India. So we do want to know what your final product is going to be like. You know, so you should talk about it, but you should not take up the entire 6-page proposal laying out your proposal, laying out what the final product is going to be chapter by chapter. You need to talk about your research questions, and then you need to talk about your field methodology and how you hope to accomplish your objectives, specifically what you're going to be doing in India. So don't think of this proposal, don't think of this application as a book proposal. You should not present your conclusions as far gone. You know, you want to show that you that you have hypotheses that you want to investigate, but you don't want to demonstrate. You don't want to show the committee that you're just going to confirm what you've already decided, what you've already settled on. So please make sure that you do not present foregone conclusions as hypotheses. Again, be wary of presenting your project as groundbreaking in terms of being the first to do something. It's much better to situate your project in existing scholarship, talk about how you're building on the work of other scholars, investigating new angles, introducing new variables or whatever. Because, you know, very often people will say, I'm the first person that's ever done this. And you know, the committee will say, well, actually, no, you know, there have been other people who've done this. So you don't want to get yourself caught in that trap. Again, the period of time requested needs to be realistic and justified in terms of the goals you aim to accomplish. That's very, very important. And as Arvind said, it's really important to show your proposal to a trusted advisor, trusted colleagues. Now, I'm actually speaking directly to our applicants for senior fellowships. Most of our applicants for junior fellowships clearly have shown their proposal to their dissertation advisor, to their dissertation committee, which is fantastic. That's what they should be doing. Unfortunately, it's also clear that some of our senior applicants have not shown their proposals to their colleagues or to trusted friends, and that's a big mistake. You should always show your proposal to a trusted colleague, a trusted friend, because they are going to see things that maybe you have missed. So I'm just gonna, before I'm gonna ask Anurag to speak, just talk about the performing and creative arts applications. Now, people who are applying in this category are applying to do artistic or creative projects in India. In general, most of the applicants in this field want to do either music or dance projects, but we also consider projects in the visual arts, painting, photography, filmmaking, set design, costume design. We also consider projects in creative writing. So you need to, you know, this application category is not for people who are just beginning their artistic careers. You know, you should have a track record. And we do ask applicants for the performing arts category to provide a URL to their to a work sample, music video, dance video, maybe examples of painting, something that the committee can look at. Make sure the URL is still works, because unfortunately some people in the past have actually sent us a URL that does not work. So please make sure that the URL you are sending us works. please make sure it's going to work throughout the entire review period. Our application deadline is November 15th. The committee will be reviewing applications until the selection committee meeting, which will be at the end of March 2025. So you must make sure that your URL is going to work throughout the entire review period. Okay, so thank you very much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anurag to talk about his experience with the application process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elise. And thank you, Anandi and Arvind, for inviting me. I wanted to reflect a little bit on the process of revising my AIIS proposal. And the first application that I sent in was, I'm actually a cultural historian of the early modern period in South Asia. And my dissertation focused on ideas of madness and mental illness in the Mughal Empire in particular. And I applied in the 2020 cycle. So I sent in my application in October 2019 for conducting fieldwork in India between 2020 and 2021. And I was still a PhD student at the University of California, Berkeley then. So the feedback that I got on my first proposal, I just wanted to kind of show you how what was the kinds of comments that I received. They said that it was a coherently conceived project with a well-defined conceit to circumscribe the topic, and they understood that this was my main theme. They understood that these were the different rubrics within which I wanted to work. They asked a bunch of questions. They said, what precisely would be learned by privileging madness across so many types of sources in the study of the Mughal world? Why madness? So they asked a thematic question about the conceptual framing of my project. Then they asked me about the proposal as it stands suggests much greater engagement with the emic concern, however, somewhat narrowly so. So they asked me to consider other scholarship on the period, and they asked me to look beyond the ambit of just looking at the Mughal period or just looking at Islamic sources or other kinds of sources that I had highlighted in my proposal. For example, they asked me to look at madness in Tibet and in Buddhist context as a comparative study. Then they asked me to speak to the recent turn in scholarship. So both of these, the second set of comments addressed the scholarly review in my proposal. And they asked me to expand my ambit and speak to recent scholarship on Hindu-Muslim interactions in the 16th and 17th centuries, which is the period I work on. And they said that it would be conducive to a fuller historically located study of the phenomenon in question. So this was one set of comments that I received. The second comment that I received was that the current proposal is too vast. So now they raised questions about the timeline of my project and the possibility of conducting it in 11 months. So I'd applied for the Junior Research Fellowship, which is 11 months in India. And they said the number of months noted against each archive that I had suggested was too brief for the work intended. They said that it reveals my unfamiliarity with the day-to-day functioning, and that was true. I had not conducted archival work at that point. I was still sort of taking graduate seminars, and I hadn't actually been to the archives at that point. And I had looked at some of the catalogs from these archives online and identified some of the sources, but I hadn't apportioned adequate time to spend in each archive. So I identified archives like the Khodabakhsh Library in Patna, the Arabic and Persian Research Institute in Tonk in Rajasthan, and the Asiatic Society in Calcutta as my potential archival sites. They said that that I should, in my next iteration, make a list of particular manuscripts by their titles, and that I should go through the catalogs more carefully, and then I should list them in the bibliography. So they said that a lot of the sources I'd identified actually were available online through archive.org or Hathi Trust or other online sources. So the need to go to India was not established clearly. Elise, could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is how in the next iteration, so I applied in October 2020 for the 2021 cycle, by which time I was already in India and I'd started doing fieldwork. And by that time, the pandemic had broken out and I was sort of, I'd done like a couple of months of fieldwork and then I was in lockdown in India. And I applied having navigated the archival catalogs a little more and having gone over the feedback from my first proposal more carefully. So after a very kind of revised 6-page proposal, in my 7th page, so this was the 7th page that we are required to amend if we've applied before. And in the revised iteration, we need to kind of show how we've implemented the changes that were suggested to us from the previous proposal. So I just wanted to show you what I did. So I said that my application was unsuccessful last year, and my project statement was titled, and this was what the intended expanse of my project would be, the proposed ambit. And I said that I was now applying with a much narrower project, which would seem doable. So the first concern that I addressed was the scope of the project and the ability to carry out archival work across so many different kinds of sources. I kind of made it more narrowly focused on medical sources, a history of medicine, but I also brought in some poetry and Sufi or religious sources, as opposed to kind of talking about politics and gender and literature and legal sources. It was a very vast project, and I made it a little more delimited. I made it focused on medical treatises and on Sufi and poetic sources. And so I said that this is how I would address the first set of comments. The second set of comments was more to do with the theme and the conceptual framing of my project. They said, why have I privileged madness over other possible frameworks? And in this iteration, I said that these are the reasons why I think studying madness and mental illness in Mughal India is a viable topic. And this is how it builds on previous scholarship. And this is how the kinds of contributions it will make to extant scholarship, and how I will navigate the sources in order to achieve these goals. The third set of comments was to do with looking at relevant scholarship. And they specifically asked me to look at Hindu-Muslim interactions in early modern South Asia and consider other Indian and Tibetan traditions of madness. So I said that I've noted that by showing how there was a close intertwining of bhakti or Hindu devotional and Sufi or Muslim devotional madness, and paying attention to the amalgamation of Indic and Greco-Arabic or Ayurvedic and Unani medicine. So that's how I kind of showed that I'd taken that feedback into account. And lastly, in terms of the timeline, which I think is something that all of us struggle with when we've not visited the archives, having done a couple of months of archival work, I now realize that this is the amount of time I would need in each archive, and these are the possible sources that I need to work with. So I said that I've gone through the archival catalogs more carefully, and I've underscored the relevance of each archive and the sources in each archive, most of which were unpublished manuscripts in Persian. And I also emphasized my language training in Persian, which was the main research language for my project, and how I want to spend fieldwork, my time in India, my remaining time in India. And I said that I've already spent 3 months of fieldwork in India and then gone into lockdown. So I said that this is how in Aligarh, Hyderabad, and Patna, these are the archives I want to look at, and this is how much time I want to apportion to each archive and the specific sources I have identified in each archive. So the second time around, having shown that I addressed their comments successfully and how I kind of had changed the ambit of my project a little bit to make it seem more achievable. I also want to mention that the second time around, because I was already in India and I was kind of in the middle of fieldwork when I'd applied, I said that I wanted to apply for a 6-month fellowship as opposed to an 11-month fellowship. So it's also possible that the second time around you can alter the timeline a little bit if you've already started fieldwork. So at least the next slide, please. Thank you. So the next time, this is the feedback that I got, that it was a proposal that was accepted, and it said that I addressed the gap in the historiography, and that this is how they were able to identify that this is how it's decentering prevailing frameworks, even though, and obviously they still gave me feedback that could potentially take my project in a different direction. They asked me to consider contemporary work on madness. And they said that the long period of the project still needs to be considered. And they said that the methodological concern is coming through in the project. So it's not as though it's going to be a perfect proposal. There are still going to be concerns and possibilities of improvement. But just as Elise said, going through multiple iterations, I went through multiple iterations with my dissertation advisor and with other committee members. I showed it to a couple of other graduate students, and I received a lot of feedback on the second iteration. And I think that really helped me hone my proposal the second time. But it still left some questions unanswered, even though my project was accepted. So it's never going to be a perfect proposal. There are still going to be steps that need to be taken to make it more coherent and more achievable in the time frame that you're suggesting. They still ask questions about why madness isn't the definition of madness and how it will be conceptualized in clinical terms. Also something that needs qualification and historicization. So they were still asking conceptual questions about the theme of my project, but I felt that I was able to demonstrate a little bit how I would make this project work in a 6-month fellowship, and I would be able to complete the remainder of my fieldwork in India. So that's all I wanted to kind of share. Hopefully it's helpful for you to kind of understand this from the perspective of somebody whose application was not successful once and it was successful the second time around, and how I went about revising my proposal. And I just wanted to say that a couple months ago, with the help of AIIS and the fieldwork I was able to finish, the start date of my fieldwork with the AIIS fellowship was postponed because of the pandemic, and I finished my fieldwork in the end of 2022. I also attended the AIIS conference in Delhi and Gurgaon in 2022, and I was able to. I'd already started writing my dissertation by that point, but I went back to India and I finished up the remainder of my fieldwork. And then I went back to Berkeley and I finished my dissertation. So I submitted my dissertation in August, which is last month. And I just wanted to share that there is light at the end of the tunnel for those of you who are PhD scholars. After having done fieldwork and after writing a dissertation, now I'm a visiting assistant professor of Asian Studies at Hamilton College in upstate New York, and no longer in Berkeley. But yeah, and I'm grateful to AIIS for supporting my project. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Anurag. You are a wonderful example of how there is life after being a graduate student, and the slog of several years of working on your dissertation. Congratulations on getting your PhD and getting a job at Hamilton College. That's really fantastic. And just a couple of other things before we go into the Q&A. I just wanted to say that you know, a lot of people actually will apply 1 year and they will not be successful, and then they will apply the next year and they will submit a much improved proposal, and then they will be selected to get a fellowship. So if you do apply, and get turned down, it's not the end of the world. Believe me, I would say probably half of our junior fellows are repeat applicants. They've submitted a proposal in 1 year, got it turned down, and then they resubmit. So people should not be discouraged if it turns out you get turned down the first time. Everyone will get comments, no matter whether you've been turned down or whether you've been selected to receive a fellowship. Everyone will get comments. So please do look at your comments very carefully and think very hard about it, and then use those comments to submit a revised proposal. We do, I should say, over the last few years, we've actually been getting more applications since the start of the pandemic than we had in the 5 or 6 years prior to the pandemic. And we do select about 18 to 20% of the overall applicant pool to receive a fellowship. So every year we have about 31 fellowships a year. And we expect that we will be able to award the same amount in this upcoming cycle. And just a reminder again, what the timeline is, the application deadline is November 15th, 2024. So there's still almost 2 months to go. There's no, the application portal does not close at midnight, Central Time. If you're out in Hawaii, if you're out in California and you want to submit, at 2 a.m. on, November 16th, Chicago time, that's perfectly fine. So don't agonize about, if it's midnight, it's not the end of the world. The application portal will remain open. The selection committee will actually be receiving your proposals, and they'll be reviewing them until the end of March, when we'll have the selection committee meeting, and everyone will be notified of the selection committee's decisions right after the selection committee meets. So that's the timeline. So let's see. So I'm going to actually be looking at the chat to see there are any unanswered questions, and I guess I will also share any questions that look like that they might be of interest to other people. But if anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. Let's see. Is that Deborah raising her hand? Yes. Can you unmute yourself?
Sure, thank you. I had two questions. One is my project is part scholarly and part artistic. So I was wondering if there was a particular format for the bibliography that is preferred by the committee. That was one question.
Are you applying, what category of fellowship are you applying for?
It would be a senior creative and performing arts fellowship.
Okay. So if it's a senior, if it's a creative and performing arts fellowship, I mean, the end product would be not a scholarly book or article or something like that. The end product should be a some kind of creative product, like a film. We've had people do projects like films where research is incorporated into the final product. But yeah, you should definitely think of presenting a final product that is a creative product as opposed to an academic work.
So it would be a book of photography of dance reliefs, medieval dance reliefs from a temple. But it would include analysis of the dance reliefs. So it's multidisciplinary because it deals with archaeology, art history, dance. So mainly, it's dance, because that's been my profession for most of my life. So the other thing was I did a multidisciplinary project in the past. I have a URL. Is the URL that you prefer that we submit? We can only submit one. And that was one question. I would submit something that I have done in the past, which was a reconstruction of dances that were done at the Bauhaus. But a question is, because these reliefs are very precious and they were somewhat destroyed in a recent restoration, I was wondering if there would be some way to include photographs of these reliefs, which I would want to publish in a book, in possibly the project statement.
So the project statement can only be 6 pages, and we do not allow appendices. So so I mean, if what you may want to do is in the text of your project statement, you may want to include a link, which is fine, a link to the photographs, so that the reader, the selection committee readers will be able to just like click on the link so they can actually look at the photographs that you're discussing.
Mhm.
But I would not suggest taking up space in the 6-page project statement to actually include pictures, because that's just going to take up too much room. And
Right.
again, appendices are not allowed. And as for the bibliography, you can include both scholarly works in addition to, URLs if you want to.
Mhm.
That's perfectly fine to include websites, different kinds of online archives, online resources. You can include those in the bibliography as well.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So I see Shiv Sharma has a hand up. Shiv?
Yes, thank you, Alyssa. Hi, I'm a graduate student at Emory University, and I had a couple of questions. One is regarding the formal affiliation with the Indian universities that the applications require. So if you could expand on that more, what kind of formal affiliation do you require? Or is it more in the sense of general networks of scholars that you'll be engaging with? And the second one is, again, if you could say a bit more about the personal statement, especially because it was mentioned that it's in lieu of letters of recommendation. And since these two genres can be a bit different, what should or should we not focus on when writing the personal statements? Thank you.
Okay, so when it comes to affiliation, so the Indian government actually requires that all of our fellows be affiliated officially with an Indian institution. So what we ask people to do is include a couple of suggestions. So we do not expect our applicants to have made the arrangements themselves. I mean, it's very difficult to actually arrange the formal affiliation. So our office in India actually takes care of it. But we just ask people to suggest institutions they want to be affiliated with. So they should be it should be institutions in the primary research site. So if you want to be doing if you want to be cited primarily in Kolkata, you should pick so you should suggest some affiliating institutions in Kolkata. And we do, if you look at the application, you'll see actually that we include a list of institutions with which we normally affiliate our fellows and have MOUs, MOUs, Memoranda of Understanding with these institutions. So please do, select an institution from our list if you're not familiar with an institution. You don't necessarily need to specify, a particular scholar. Our office in India, if you happen to know somebody that you want to work with, it's fine. You can include that, but it's not necessary. But also, just in general, people tend to agonize a lot about the institutional affiliation. It's a formality required by the Indian government. But you can be, you can be affiliated with one institution, and you can interact with colleagues at another institution or other institutions. It's not going to restrict you in any way. The affiliation is just a formality. So we do encourage people to have relationships with their affiliating institutions. Very often, our fellows find it very very helpful to have close relations with their institutions. They can sometimes attend seminars or even present papers at seminars, and they have they appreciate having the opportunity to interact with colleagues at their affiliating institutions. Other people may not necessarily want that. We do require that our fellows send a copy of their final report to their affiliating institution, though. And again, you're free to interact with any number of colleagues at other institutions. And as for your second question, the personal statement is pretty, it really depends. We do ask one component of the application is a CV. So it's a 2-page CV, and then you list your education, any publications, anything relevant. Personal statement is really an opportunity for the applicant to expand on the CV, to let us know something about, let's say, why you developed an interest in your particular research topic. what in your background led you to become a scholar of South Asia. Maybe just something that you'd like the committee to know about yourself, basically. So it's really up to you to let us know what you think is important for the committee to know. So let's see, I see Ahil has a hand up. Ahil.
Hi, Elise. Yes, thank you. So I'm a Hindustani vocalist based in Canada, and I've been a practitioner for over 2 decades. I know that non-US citizens can apply for senior fellowships despite not being affiliated with the institution of higher education in the US, from what I read in the comments. I was wondering if that also applies for the Performing and Creative Arts Fellowship, or would I have to have some formal affiliation with a education institute in the States?
Yeah, so non-US citizens so for non-US citizens are eligible to apply for an AIIS fellowship if they are either graduate students or faculty at a university or college institution of higher education in the United States. So that's a requirement for non-US citizens.
Okay, even for performing arts.
Right,
Okay.
right, for all the categories, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Radha? Oh, I'm sorry, Shashank. I'm sorry, Shashank was next. Shashank?
Thanks, Elise. I actually have 2 questions. Uh, one is just a confirmation of my application, which is, I applied in 2022 and I was rejected. So I didn't apply last year, and even though I skipped it, I'm assuming that my application will be considered as a repeat submission, so I can append a 7th page to my proposal. So I just wanted to confirm this.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay, great. And the second one is, I believe, to Anandi, because she addressed this point, which is, my work is in the natural sciences, more specifically in architectural acoustics, focusing on the acoustics of Indian worship spaces. And Anandi, when you read out the reviewer list, it didn't seem to have anyone with the expertise in my area, which is in the natural sciences. The last time I applied, I didn't get, to be honest, I didn't get very helpful feedback, with the reviewer actually even admitting in the reviewer comments that they didn't have expertise in the technical aspects of my project. So do you have any advice on that?
Anandi, do you want to answer that?
I mean, I know, and this, at least I'll have to rely on you for a little bit here. I know that in some instances, maybe was it for performing arts applications, that sometimes like external specialists are brought in, like in the case of like instrumental specialists, I know, but I don't know. So at least I may have to defer to you on this one for the case of like in architectural. I know we have colleagues affiliate with us in different parts of AIIS in this particular area, for example. But for example, if we have, someone in the natural sciences, hard sciences, or someone apply, and we don't have someone in the social sciences humanity committee already, would we like have someone consult in that sense, at least?
No, so we have, so the selection committee is composed of 10 people. And half are social scientists, half are humanists. So the committee really runs the gamut. We have a historian, we have a religious studies person, an art historian, political scientist. We have someone who specializes in environmental studies. We have a gender studies specialist, someone who does cultural studies. So we do not bring in, an additional committee member if for the research applications. We do have a consultant for the performing arts applications. This consultant is a specialist in Indian music and dance traditions. And so that consultant will review the performing arts applications and provide recommendations and comments. But that's the only outside consultant that we would use. but again, as Arvind, has said, it's really, really important to make sure that your proposal is addressed to a broad scholarly audience. So if you're a political scientist, remember, there will be a political scientist on the committee, but there'll also be, your application will also be read by an art historian, will also be read by an anthropologist. And they, and so they're not necessarily going to understand acronyms or jargon. And the same goes for someone who's in religious studies. If you're talking about a particular religious text from the 13th century, you can't assume that the committee is going to know what it is. So you just have to remember to just think about addressing your application to a general scholarly audience.
Yeah, I understand that, but if I get a feedback saying I don't have the technical expertise, then how do I build on my application to, when it's clearly based, my work is based in India, it's based on Indian temples. So then, what's your recommendation? Do I just not?
Well, so we do have, let's put it this way, we do have an art historian on the committee. So, so your application, again, that the person who's reviewed, the art historian on the committee may not be exactly familiar with your particular topic, but your proposal should be legible, intelligible to an art historian who focuses on a topic that's not necessarily your topic. So I would just think about that. Again, I would, as Arvind also discussed, I would show your proposal to other people in your department who are maybe not specializing in your particular topic, to make sure that that they think that that your proposal would be legible to just a general scholarly audience. I think that's really important.
I might just add there, as someone, so I was trained initially in the hard sciences, and then also have humanist training. So I kind of understand like your kind of specific point. And I know a number of people had some of these kind of specialist questions. And I think the biggest thing here with the project statement is to rely on the storytelling about the why of the project rather than the technical details. And to that point, having someone outside of your field, like if there's a colleague, be it faculty or fellow student or whatever in anyone's particular situation, who is in kind of a parallel field, but perhaps not as technical, read it for the storytelling aspect as if you're writing any kind of grant. So even if you're in the hard sciences and you're doing a multidisciplinary grant that's going to be crossing humanities and natural sciences, it has to be legible to both members of both different disparate disciplines, right? So I would rely less on the technical details and more of the bigger picture storytelling for the application. And again, it's always great to have as many people from different areas read it as possible.
Arvind, do you have something to add?
Yeah, if I can just add to that, in the proposal itself, I would, if possible, I would divide the technical from the non-technical. Building on what Anandi just said, a good narrative, and then also warning the committee members that, okay, here's going to be a technical discussion and try to stay with me or something to that effect. And then after the brief technical discussion to come back to the narrative. And then just tell us in lay terms, why this technicality matters to the narrative, right? So that's the only way you can approach non-technical people on the committee. So to basically integrate, and yes, again, showing it to people really outside your field will really help before you apply, so. And I can also add that committee members are open-minded. So I do remember one of the years, I forget which year it was, we had a very, very technical proposal. So we all struggled with it. We tried to, get meaning out of it. And there was, the proposal writer also did help. And finally, they were selected for the fellowship. So committee members are open-minded, but I think what might have happened, I don't know what happened here, but if it is a lot of technicalities,
Mhm.
then it would be really difficult for the committee to to understand it. So think of it as helping the committee members understand your topic, and yes, focus on the narrative, and provide the technicality, but make sure that the technicality then connects to the proposal, to the narrative. So that'll help.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Radha, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I have a quick question. So I plan on applying for the Performing Arts Fellowship. The project that I'm proposing is in conjunction with another dancer as well. We dance as a duet very often, and I see online that it does say that applications from individuals who are part of collaborative projects is completely okay. In the case of performing arts specifically, if the project that I was proposing heavily involved there being a duet with another person, would the committee and would you like to see a portfolio from both individuals or just myself, the applying individual?
So you're saying the other person is not also going to be applying for a fellowship?
And this is something I wanted to ask, but as I understand it, it's if two people are working together or one and X number of people, only one person applies. Is that correct?
No. So we give fellowships to individuals. So people can apply. As part of a team. So for instance, 2 or 3 people can apply to do a fellowship, a project together, but each team member needs to submit their own application.
I see.
So if you're applying with 1 or 2 other people, they also would need to submit their own application. And so for a team project, we have awarded fellowships to teams in the past, but each team member, obviously the project statements will be somewhat similar, but each team member should discuss what they're going to contribute to the project. So if one person is a videographer and another person is going to be doing something else, that should be made clear. What person is doing what part of the project. If it turns out that you're applying and you're going to work with collaborators in India who are not asking for their own fellowship, you don't need to include their work in your packet. You just may want to discuss, in your project statement, who these people are, that you've laid the groundwork, that you've, because the committee would want to see that that you've established relationships with people in India that you want to work with.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure. Esther, I see you have a hand up.
Hi. I had a couple of questions. One is I just wanted to confirm some of this information. One is the bibliography included in the 6 pages of the project statement, or is it separate?
No, it's additional.
The second is
it's additional. So it's a 6-page project statement, and then the bibliography is an additional 1 to 3 pages.
Gotcha. Thank you. And the other two, one is if I've made a unsuccessful application before, but my project has changed since then, do I still need to submit a 1-page application? 1-page addendum to this application, or is it considered technically a fresh application? And I think my second question was, I see that the application also requires transcripts. Do they need to be official transcripts, or can they be unofficial transcripts?
So if it's a junior fellowship application, then you should include transcripts.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So we only want US transcripts. We do not want transcripts from any other country, and they can be unofficial transcripts, that you can just download from your university's website using your password or whatever. That's preferable.
Sure.
So that's fine. And if you've, if you've applied in the past, let's say 2 or 3 years, you should include a resubmission statement. You can talk about how you've changed your project.
All right, great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Nishant?
Hi. I did post my question, but since it is not applied, I'll ask. So I wanted to ask, like, I looked at the AIIS list of universities that can, like, student applicants can have affiliation. So I already have, like, I'm familiar with faculty from other universities of my region of research. Like my research is in Assam in India. So I was wondering if I can suggest names of other universities which are not in the list, AIIS list, but are in the same region.
Okay. So, yeah, so this is the thing. So again, affiliation is a formality that's required by the Indian government. So, we've worked out these MOUs with all the institutions in our list, and they're familiar with the process of affiliating our fellows. They provide. The certificate of affiliation is actually a formal document, and it needs to be stamped by the appropriate people at the institution. So, sometimes people do want to affiliate with an institution that's not on our list. But the problem is that even if you have colleagues who say, oh, I'd love to work with you, whatever, they may not be, they're probably not the people who are actually going to stamp and sign the document, the certificate of affiliation. You don't want your request for affiliation to be buried in university bureaucracy. And the people at the university may not know anything about preparing a certificate of affiliation, and they might just stick it in the bottom of their pile and forget all about it. So, you don't want it to be left in limbo. The best certificate of affiliation is the certificate of affiliation that comes in quickly. So you don't want to, if it's a choice of affiliating with an institution that we know is going to produce the paperwork in a reasonable amount of time, that's much better than trying to get affiliation with an institution that's just gonna not be able to take care of the proper paperwork. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Also, the other issue is that we cover the cost of affiliation for the institutions that are on our list. But some institutions not on our list may actually charge a high affiliation fee. And in that case, the fellow would need to pay the affiliation fee, which can be a few $100s. So, so that's another reason to pick institutions on our list. And again, you can collaborate with colleagues at other institutions. So the affiliating with one institution is definitely not going to restrict you in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Srimoy, I see your hand up.
Hi, I have a quick question. So with regard to the junior research fellowship, so if someone doesn't have a publication in a peer-reviewed journal at the time of their application, will that in any way affect the chances of getting the grant?
Yeah, well, most junior applicants are probably not going to have publication. So, the committee has different standards for reviewing the different categories of applications. So, there's going to be definitely one standard for reviewing the junior applications and a completely different standard for reviewing the senior applications. And among the senior applicants also, some of the senior applicants will have received their PhDs very recently, and other senior applicants may have received their PhD 30 years ago. So again, there's going to be different standards for reviewing the junior applicants. And Arvind, do you want to say anything additional about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it actually for junior, it doesn't really matter, right? Again, the basic criterion would be the project statement and to what extent it is clear and, basically follow the steps. But publication, I mean, if you have it, that's great, but that's not going to tip the scales in one way or the other. So I would still say just focus on the project statement.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's see. I'm just going to look at the chat again. I've been trying to answer some of the questions in the chat. Let's see if I see anything here that has not. Okay, I think. Okay. Does having prior funding, such as a seed grant to start the project, make a specific difference? So yeah, so people, okay, so this is the thing. We provide funding for people to go to India. We provide a round trip airplane ticket to people, and then we provide a stipend to people, which covers their living expenses in India and also research expenses. So we allow people to take other grants that fund other things. So some graduate students in general will have some kind of a pot of money that that they can use throughout their graduate student experience. And that's fine because that money is not specifically designated for going to India. Some people will get some other kind of grant to do their to write up their dissertation or to go and do research in another country, and that's perfectly fine to take that. The only thing we do not allow people to take another grant at the same time. So you can't have both a Fulbright and an AIIS to go to India to do your research. If you've already received seed funding to do some preliminary research, scoping out research, and that you've done that before you're planning on doing your AIIS project, that's perfectly fine. But it's always good to talk about what funding you've already received. You should certainly mention it, and there actually is a place in the application where you should specify any other funding that you've received. Let's see if there's some other questions that people have asked. Do shorter duration grant proposals have a better chance? Well, let's see. So again, the most important thing is that the period of time you request has to make sense in terms of the project. So, so some people I think have thought, oh, well, I'll only ask for 3 months because then the committee is more likely to give me less money or something. But that's not the way the committee looks at it. The committee looks at whether the project is going to be successful. So, if you want to do a very ambitious project that's actually going to require 10 or 11 months of research, and you only ask for 3 months, the committee is going to think, well, how can you possibly accomplish those goals in just 3 months? The committee is going to think you're being very unrealistic. So you really do need to ask for the period of time that makes sense in terms of your project goals. That's the most important thing. There needs to be there needs to be a real coordination between what you want to accomplish and your project goals. So some people do make the mistake of asking for too little time. It's just I mean, especially for junior fellowship applicants, the committee knows that it's hard for less experienced researchers to sort of get their projects off the ground in India. People can face all kinds of obstacles in India. So, you want to build in the extra time. You have to plan for the extra time to be built into your proposal. So, if you ask for just a month, the committee is going to think, well, it's going to take you, a couple of weeks just to get going. And, then you'll just have 2 weeks left to do your project. So you should try to ask. I mean, I always tell people it's better to ask for more time than you think you need. You're not going to be held to it if you ask for 7 or 8 months. in your proposal, and it turns out you only need 5 or 6 months, you know, to actually be in India, that's fine. You know, that will be, you know, that will be worked out at the time we actually make the arrangements for you to go to India. So, so don't worry about it at the application stage. But at the application stage, it's a much better strategy to ask for more time than you think you'll need. And also people have asked whether they can do their project in multiple phases. Yes, you can certainly do your project in a couple of phases. If you want to do your project in one phase in the summer of 2025 and another one in the summer of 2026, that's perfectly fine, but we only provide one round-trip airplane ticket. Let's see, Nishant, did you have your hand up again, or is that left over from before? Oh, okay. Does anyone else have a
Sorry.
Oh, Shiv, yeah, Shiv.
Thank you, Elise, for just taking this timeline question. I had a follow-up on that. So as I understand it, while you're saying that we should budget in more time than required on the field, but I just wanted to understand, especially in terms of also giving a timeline for the completion of the goals, should that take into account strictly time related to fieldwork? Or can that also encompass, you know, analyzing the data afterwards, reading alongside writing, etc.? So again, my question is in the sense that, let's say if my fieldwork, which is true in my case, is very limited, and I do foresee perhaps even by sort of more relaxed estimates that I'll require, let's say 5 months, should that be explained only in terms of the work I'm going to do in the field in India? Or should I also explain what I plan to do with the work in terms of my larger journey of sort of completing this dissertation project?
So if I'm understanding you correctly, so I mean, you know, again, your project statement is 6 pages. So what we fund, you know, is going to India and doing research. So obviously, I mean, people will, you know, have to analyze their findings and write their dissertation. That's you know, that's what we expect would happen. So you don't need to. I mean, you know, you can say, you know, I want to do my research, you know, between September, you know, 2025 and, you know, June 2026 or whatever, and that you hope that you'll receive your dissertation in 2027. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you don't really have to talk about, you know, how much time you think you're going to spend writing up your project after you finish. We're interested in the actual the research in India component of your project, not necessarily you know, when you think you'll get your degree, which is hard to predict sometimes.
No, thank you so much. I think my question was coming from certain other grants, such as for instance, ACLS grant kind of requires you to sort of account for larger process of the research and writing itself, even if the grant is ultimately given for a definite amount of time within that. But I think your response anyway clarifies that you are specifically looking at the India component of the research. So the proposal should just focus on that. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you're you know, in the first, you know, part of your project, you know, you are going to be talking about what your dissertation is going to look like, what you're going to be investigating. But yeah, I mean, you only have 6 pages, so it should really focus on what you are actually going to be doing in India while you're you know, using our money.
Thank you.
Let's see. So one question is, can the AIIS project be part of my dissertation and not my entire dissertation? So I don't know if the person who asked this question, Sayanangshu, I think, would want to clarify. So if I mean, we do have people applying who want to do projects in different countries, India and Australia, India and Canada or the United Kingdom. That's fine. So if people you know, get another grant to do research in another country, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to take that funding. It's perfectly fine again for people to take funding, to do dissertation write-up or for something else. But we do not allow people to take a grant concurrent with our fellowship that will provide the same kind of funding that we provide, which is ticket to India plus stipend for the time that you're in India. Andrew, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question, clarifying something that Arvind mentioned earlier. He had talked about the archival process and talking about like what you wanted to, stating explicitly in your project statement what you're going to be reading in the archives. And so in my archives, it's a state archive that I want to do, and they have a catalog list of collections, not specifically the files within those collections. Now, there's two state archives. It's Jammu and Kashmir, the state I'm interested in. And I've been to Jammu and not to Srinagar. There's two archives in what would have been the winter and summer capitals of the Maharaja. And basically, I'm interested in reading one of the Maharaja's files. And so I'm wondering, how I go about that in my project statement. Of course, I can look at and see what files from those archives other scholars have used and say that I'd like to read those files too. But there's also maybe the potential of files that I haven't encountered in scholarship before that I'd like to read too. And part of my intention to go there is to read those. And so I'm wondering kind of like, how do I navigate that in the project statement, the possibility of unknowns and, trying to nail down as much knowns as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's possible, I know state archives are a tricky proposition, but if it is possible to contact somebody in the state archive and who can give you some details about the papers that are that are available there for you to look at when you would be visiting them, and even if that is somewhat unsuccessful, but if they do get back to you, you can mention that in your proposal, right? So you can say that you intend to go to this archive, you intend to look at these collections, that you have spoken to so and so in the archive, and they have assured me that those papers are available, or that I can have access to them. So some kind of communication that you may have had with these archivists, if you can include that, even if you are not able to fully know. Obviously, we'll never know what's in the archive unless you actually go and spend time there. But yeah, any information you can get, and even writing about the correspondence, that would be helpful for the committee.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Just a couple more questions. So can we defer the award if we want to start later? So the fellowship, if people applying in this cycle, people applying for the November 15th, 2024 deadline, need to complete their projects by December 31st, 2026. So that's a hard finish date. So the project needs to be completed by December 31st, 2026. Does the fellowship appreciate and approve of research proposals based on purely critical theories? So the bottom line is we provide funding for people to go to India to do their research. So whatever you propose, whatever kind of project you propose, you must justify the need to go to India to be there to do your research. And if you could do your project anywhere, if you can sit and think about critical theories in the United States just as well, then yeah, that's not gonna sit very well with the selection committee. So you do need to justify your presence in India. So whatever it is that you want to do, whether you want to talk to people, whether you want to do archival research, whatever you want to do, that's fine. But you need to prove that you need to demonstrate to the committee that you need to be in India in order to do it. Okay. Sayangashu, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Elise. So it's related to the question I had posted in the chat. The question that I wanted to ask is, if I get the AIIS funding for, let's say, a part of my dissertation, which would be my second paper, but then for my third paper, which has a different scope, if I choose to apply and if I get funding from elsewhere, I mean, then does it conflict with the mandate of AIIS fellowship, and do I have to like forego it? That's what I wanted to ask.
I mean, are you talking about funding to actually go to India to do your research?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so what we provide is a round-trip airplane ticket. We provide a stipend for living expenses and allowance for research expenses. So you cannot accept another source of funding if that funding is intended to duplicate what we provide. So again, so if you're getting like some graduate students will get a stipend every year that they're in graduate school, but the stipend is not specifically intended to fund your research in India. People will, will be able to use their stipend for a variety of their expenses that come up. You can certainly take a grant that will cover your rent, while you're in India, that will cover your car payments while you're in India or whatever. That's perfectly fine. You can use, your graduate stipend, to cover those costs. Some people will actually need to buy equipment. If people will need to buy special cameras or video equipment or some other kind of equipment, or if they need to do some kind of lab testing, if they're archaeologists and they need to do some tests of bones or something like that, those expenses would not be covered by our fellowship. So you are allowed to accept money that would cover those costs to buy equipment, laboratory expenses, whatever. So the bottom line is you cannot accept a concurrent grant that would duplicate the funding that we provide, So yeah, you can accept other money for anything else.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And again, we do not have any preference for any specific fields. We welcome applicants from all disciplines. We do not have any preference for any specific types of methods. Some people will do archival research. Some people will do interviews. Some people will do participant observation. So any methodology is fine as long as you demonstrate to the committee how your methodology is going to be used to address your research questions. That's the most important thing. So I guess if there are no more questions, I guess again, this is recorded and we will upload the recording to the website. If you have any further questions, please send them to AIIS@uchicago.edu. If I can't answer them, I will ask someone else to answer your question for you. But I'd like to thank everybody. And I would like to especially thank Arvind and Anurag and Anandi for their presentations today. And we look forward to receiving your fellowship applications by November 15th.
Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elise.